to welcome the leader of the Democratic Action Party, our host party here in Malaysia, the Secretary General of the DAP, Lim Guang Eng. So it doesn't work? It's not on? So, Lim Guang Eng is not only the leader of the DAP, the Secretary General of the DAP, he is also a member of the board of the Progressive Alliance. That's something which makes me and makes us very proud. And he is also the Finance Minister of Malaysia. Dear comrade Lim Guang Eng, we are here more than 40 international delegations who embarked to Malaysia, from Argentina to Palestine, from New Zealand to Mongolia. So it's a real global gathering. And I remember 4 years ago, you were already so kind and hosted a meeting of the Progressive Alliance in Penang. You stayed at this time, which was a role model, I think, also for the victory in last year. And I remember as well that we did a mission in March last year, a mission of the Progressive Alliance. As you know, we are not only a club for deliberating social democratic and progressive politics, but we are also a network of action. And this was an action of solidarity just before the election here in Malaysia, where we were facing gerrymandering and all these measures what authoritarian rulers are using to oppress and persecute the opposition. So, 1.5 years later, we are here. It's really, from my feeling, is really to when I entered 2 days ago Malaysia, it was a real difference just in the feeling and also in the mood of the people who I met here. It is becoming a freer, or maybe already a free country, and it's no comparison to 1.5 years ago. And that is mainly due to you, to the DAP and to your coalition partners who managed to have this tremendous victory. The first change in democratic, that's very important, the first democratic change in government since independence. So, once again, a welcome to Comrade Lim Guang Eng, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction from the International Secretary of SPD Germany, and of course Coordinator of Progressive Alliance, our good comrade Mr. Konstantin Wojnov, the leaders of the Democratic Action Party of Malaysia, and of course the international delegates from the Progressive Alliance from 40 countries. First, let me welcome all of you warmly in the typical Malaysian manner. Selamat datang ke Kuala Lumpur. Which is of course a very warm welcome to our comrades. I wouldn't want to use the word comrades in arms, but I think comrades in the struggle for not just, of course, the working class, but for humanity throughout the world. Now, I want to thank Progressive Alliance, of course, and of course our dear friend from Sweden, Johan Hessel, for bringing us together under the auspices of celebrating social democracy throughout the world. Now, it is remarkable that in this room we have so much linguistic diversity and cultural differences, and of course representatives from 40 countries, but we are all united by this commonality of striving for a better future for our respective populations. Now, this democratic struggle is our common denominator, and of course the pains, trials and tribulations is probably our shared language. We may not understand each other, but I'm sure we understand the pains, the trials and tribulations that we have to go through. Now for Malaysia, we are no exception. DAP was established over 53 years ago, and in that 53-year period, we were seen as a perennial opposition. And that feeling was so entrenched that no one in their right mind would ever dream of the DAP winning power, not just at the federal level, but even at the state level. So somehow it was ingrained that we were a permanent, perennial opposition. And in fact, we excelled in our role as an opposition. So much so that our leaders were natural opposition leaders in Parliament. And we played our role very well, checks and balances, until, of course, a newer, younger generation of leaders wanted to take up the cudgel and the challenge of turning probably over 35 years of the orthodox thinking that DAP would be a permanent opposition by making a bold bid for power, transforming into reality the vision of our founders. Of course, one of them is Saudara Lim Kit Siang. I do not know whether you have met him. He is the conscience and the spirit of the party. And when we started this process, coincidentally, under my leadership as a Secretary General, we managed to break through this mental block, and in 2008, for the first time, we won power at the state level in the industrial state of Penang. And I was appointed as the Penang Chief Minister, and we managed to transform what was seen as a state in a state of graceful and gradual decline, managed to turn it around to its former vibrant and dynamic self. And of course, Penang is one of the success stories, as mentioned by Constantine when he visited Penang, where not only can we see prosperity, but also shared prosperity. And the results of these efforts of good governance and clean leadership, together with a competent, forward-looking policies, have allowed the state to enjoy success. And of course, Social Democrats are very good at distributing the results of this success. And that is why for the two subsequent elections, we not only won again and again, but with larger and larger majorities. So at one time, we had only one state legislative member in a state assembly out of 14 members. But now, through our coalition and because of this good governance, we have expanded to 37 out of 40. So the opposition is reduced to what we were previously. So this turnaround could only be possible because we never lose sight. We never lose sight that we have to implement people-centric policies. And when we talk about people-centric policies, it always comes back to basics. And that means jobs. That means economic growth. That means social welfare program has a form of safety nets. That means, of course, environmental protection. And finally, most important of all, health, reasonable health protection for the masses, and human dignity, respect for human dignity for all. But these are our traditional values. This has been part of the credo of social democratic movements all over. And of course, I was brought up in that type of environment where we really thought about agitating for change, ensuring that everyone has their fair share, without so much emphasis on growing that share. But when we took power, we felt very strongly that we have to ensure that the economy grows sustainably, win the confidence of the business sector, and that after achieving these results, then we talk about distribution. I think we managed to achieve that within a term, and of course, subsequently expanded the entire model to be as inclusive as possible. But winning the federal government is very, very different from running a state government. In a state government, you can do some micromanagement. When you run a federal government, the context, the platform, the entire framework is so much larger. You cannot micromanage as we have done before. And it is always critical that you have the right policies. Not only you must have the right policies, that you must do it right to ensure that the change you want to see can be effected. And that is one of our greatest challenge, because this is the first time that we have won power in 61 years. The civil service is still beholden to the previous administration. And of course, we have to work very hard to ensure that the programs can be implemented. And I think as a social democratic movement, our emphasis should be about action. Optimism in action more than any pessimism in ideas and intellect. I'm not quoting Antonio Gramsci, of course. But I think it's very important that we act. If I can say that when we were in opposition, it was more 90% planning, 10% execution. But when you are in government, execution is everything. It is 90% execution, 10% planning. Because you can pontificate, you can espouse theories and ideas, but if it cannot be implemented and it cannot work, or you cannot ensure delivery, at the end of the day, it means nothing. And I think that is something that I would like to share, that this is a huge challenge that we are grappling with, to ensure that policies that we have crafted are able to be delivered. We are still struggling with that, and of course there's no holy script, or there's no golden rule how to get it done. We got to look at it pragmatically, taking into account the practicalities and circumstances of the day. Now, having said that, we must also not ignore the future trends, because social democratic movements should not be looking back into the past. We should try to peer into the future. We always say that social democratic parties are a natural refuge for the young. But to be a natural refuge for the young, you must be able to predict future trends. And that is why, as a political movement, as a government, we try to prepare the future for the young. As a political movement, we want to prepare the young for the future. And of course, when you talk about the future, nothing matters most than digitalization. As we move towards the digital age, we must embrace it. It is not to be resisted and try as much as possible to master it. Now, whilst digitalization is welcome, it is not without its challenges. Digitalization and other associated Industry 4.0 trends like automation, analytics, and artificial intelligence are disrupting the existing economy, creating a lot of winners, but also many losers. It is the role of the government to ensure that the losers are aided in transitioning into the new economy. One very important disruption revolves around job losses. Social democratic movements, one of the key benchmarks is job creation. And of course, increasing real wages and purchasing power. Now, but when you look at the digital age, there is a fear of job losses. And you can see that the rise of the far right and nationalist movement is a reaction to these job losses already happening around us. We hope that the technological disruption will not destroy jobs, but the World Economic Forum estimates that about 75 million jobs will be displaced globally by a shift in the division of labor between humans and machines, while 133 million new roles may emerge that are more adapted to the new division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms by 2022. But even that number of 133 million may not be enough for the 75 million job losses, because the 133 million new jobs created will be for the younger generation who are adept at the latest digital and technological advances. What do we do with the 75 million jobs which are lost? And this is our challenge. If we can find an answer to this, or even you can have half an answer, I think the future for the social democratic movement will be very bright throughout the world. One way of addressing this, of course, is by reskilling, upskilling, as well as retraining those elbowed out of the labor market to fill new jobs for new sectors that still requires a human presence to operate. However, such reskilling exercise could be costly and will require a public and private sector partnership to make this happen. Governments alone would not be able to foot the bill for reskilling programs, nor are they equipped with the comprehensive experience and infrastructure for an effective outcome. Now, we are pursuing shared prosperity. But to make sure that this prosperity can be sustained, we want also to establish an entrepreneurial economy. An entrepreneurial economy based on partnership between the public sector, the private sector, professionals, and of course the people to get public buy-in. A 4P partnership, where the government should not be dishing out grants per se, but should match grants with the private sector as well as the professionals in order to gain maximum efficiency and outcomes. And in the future digital economy, which is expected to bring about dislocation and even disappearance of existing jobs, with the hope that it will be replaced by new jobs brought about by the new technological revolution, a nature and consequence of creative destruction. Whilst some may say this creative destruction is an unavoidable consequence of new technology, such creative destruction is neither politically, economically, nor socially tenable. We reject that creative destruction is good for you. No. Unless, of course, you can replace the jobs lost. Any so-called creative destruction brought about by the onset of the digital economy that leads to social upheaval will be rejected, I'm sure, by all political movements. Instead of creative destruction, the Malaysian government prefers to look at the challenges of the digital economy, resulting in job losses as a form of digital disruption that can and must be contained. We are considering to provide income supplements or incentives to encourage employers to employ workers who cannot find jobs so that they can enjoy a living wage to mitigate the negative impact of digital disruption. Digital taxes or benefits from economic growth brought about by the new digital economy must sustain part of the old economy so that we can engineer a gentler, softer and kinder landing. In short, the digital economy need not be a threat if a softer, gentler and kinder approach can be effected to embrace its benefits. Whilst we embrace the emergence of digital economy, again, any form of disruption must be creative and sustainable, and we hope will fulfill the requirements of 3 A's. It must be available, it must be accessible, and of course, finally, it must be affordable. In any digital economy that is not available, accessible, and affordable, we are not being fair. We do not fulfill our role as a people-centric government or political movement. I've got a very long speech here. I do not wish to probably expand, but of course I think touching on the key tenets of social democratic movements, which is basically jobs, living wage, keeping the family together, protecting the environment. I think these are key issues that matters to us closely. But I just want to again emphasize the importance of winning the business sector over. That we can be concerned about the environment, but yet you can also earn profits. We put people ahead of profits, but it is only by doing so that you can ensure larger and sustainable profits in future. Until and unless you win the business community over, I think we will face challenges and may spend more time in opposition than in government. That is why I would like to suggest this 4P partnership: public sector, private sector, professionals, and the people, so that the social democratic movement broadens our appeal to these sectors. We tried that out in Penang. It worked very well. As we said, we have reduced the opposition to a rump, but you are looking at a very different ball game at the national level. So, in summary, let us appeal for solidarity towards diversity, social harmony, rule of law, political freedoms, equal opportunity, environmental protection, good governance, and a clean leadership. If we can maintain these values, your time will come. And as is been stated by Victor Hugo, no power on earth can stop an idea whose moment has come. And your moment will be here. Thank you very much.
Comrade Guaneng, this was really Very good. Thank you for sharing your perspectives on the challenges for the world society and in particular for our movement. It was really an enlightening speech, I would say, want to say, and your 4 Ps, not only your 4 Ps you just mentioned before, is a lot of food for our discussions of today, and I think also beyond. And allow me to say once again, really thank you so much for this very kind hospitality of the Democratic Action Party, so that we were able to convene this conference of the Progressive Alliance here in Malaysia. Now I have the pleasure to announce the second speaker of the today plenary session. She is a leading political personality from Europe. She was a long-standing member of the European Parliament. She is member of the Socialist Party of Portugal, and not only because she's from Portugal, but also it's linked to her personality. She's a good and old friend of Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, and you are still working very closely together with him, as far as I know. I'm speaking about the president of the European Foundation of Progressive Studies, FEPS, and I'm speaking about Maria João Rodrigues. So, I want to welcome you here at the lectern and give a warm applause to Maria.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction, Constantine. And let me, first of all, give big thanks to Ling Wang Min for a very, very inspiring speech. This is really great to be here in Malaysia and with such an outstanding group of leaders from all over Asia and the world. Well, I'm coming from Europe. I'm coming from a country which has old connections with Asia, by the way, a country which is now close to a new electoral victory with Prime Minister Antonio Costa, which is fighting hard to get absolute majority. We don't know if we can make it, but we'll be close to this. And I'm coming from a large experience in Europe with all European institutions, European Parliament, European Commission, Council as Minister, and most of all, in fact, with Antonio Guterres, working in the European Council and working for a progressive international agenda. And that's why I'm such a friend of Progressive Alliance. And let me come with my thoughts about our topic of today, social cohesion and progress, because in fact this is at the heart of the progressive movement all over the world. And let me start by addressing a first central issue, which is in our core beliefs, is the fact that contrary to the neoliberals, contrary to the conservatives, there is no contradiction between social cohesion on one hand and progress on the other hand. On the contrary, they can work hand in hand. And this is at the core of our beliefs and of our action. And there are 2 reasons for this. The first reason is that we know that the countries which went farther in progress, including economic growth, are the countries which are really taking care of social cohesion, which are really fighting social inequalities in the different shapes. So we know that economic growth can be not hindered, but on the contrary, supported by fighting social inequalities. But let me tell you, there is a second reason why there is no contradiction for us between progress and social cohesion. It's because we have a different concept of progress. Progress for us is certainly economic growth, but not only this. progress for us means that everybody should have access to a better environment, to real access to good education, social protection, healthcare, and citizen rights. So our concept of progress, in fact, is aligned with what the current Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals is stating. And that's why, once and for all, there is no contradiction between social cohesion and progress. This is our central belief as progressives. But of course, and Lee Kuan-yew made it very well, we as progressives, we want to shape the future. So we need to be able to identify all the time the new challenges coming and to propose to people progressive solutions to address these challenges. So let me speak about this. Of course we know, and it was not very long time ago, our agenda was deeply threatened by an important financial crisis. And in fact, we are still digesting this, and now we are again discussing about the possibilities of having financial problems. Also because there are talks about the risks for global economic growth in a connection with this trade war, particularly between the United States and China, and these kind of protectionist trends we have now. So this risk is there. And this means that we need to go on with our action to regulate the financial system in order to support sustainable growth. And we need to be open to trade as a main leverage for progress, but connecting trade with supporting better economic, social, and environmental standards. But then we have new challenges. And this morning we discussed about the climate change. And this is something which is really serious because we see climate change effects now every day. And we see there is much more public awareness that we need climate action. But as we discussed this morning, we need climate action with a deep sense of social justice. We even are launching the concept of climate justice. Because we know that if we don't take care of these, climate action can deepen social inequalities. So we need to make sure that we support the less favored part of the population to cope with climate action in all areas, in cities, in rural areas, in transportation. And we need to make sure that these will be translated in the agenda to be adopted this year under the framework of the United Nations action. But then we have a second challenge, and Lee Kuan-yew was so eloquent about this, is the digital transformation. And yes, definitely we should not be afraid of this. There is a lot of potential, but we need to make sure that we channel this potential in the good direction. And the first challenge will be about jobs. Yes, several jobs will be destroyed by this digital transformation, and we should be able to create other jobs. And this is possible if we keep a strong focus on new social needs. So we need to make the best of innovation, digital innovation, to address new social needs. There are so many social needs to be met. So this is really possible. And we need to support this, of course, with a big investment in skills. There is another challenge which has to do with demographic trends. First of all, migration. People in the move. And this will be a trend all over the planet. We know this. Our approach as progressives is to manage these movements in such a way that we keep open countries, open world, but we are also able to provide proper integration and a harmonious integration respecting our citizens' expectations and rights. This is a difficult task, but there is indeed a conservative approach and there is a progressive approach, and we need to make this difference very clear. But then there are the risks of discrimination. And this morning we had also important interventions on gender. I consider this the next frontier for us progressives to rebalance the world. This is a very profound rebalancing coming from centuries of imbalances. But this is happening now. We have very interesting initiatives. And most of all, young people. And Linh Nguyen Minh was so clear about this. The central test for progressives in all countries is to know if we can win the support of young people. If you can bring young people for our proposals and for our action. This is the central test. So let me conclude by telling you the following. Based on our own experience, what should be priorities? Of course, each country is a country, but I believe there are common priorities we can push for. The first one is for sure to provide jobs and good jobs. Because if you want a people-centered agenda, jobs remain crucial for men and women, for young people particularly. And if are the jobs of the future should be connected with skills for the future. So this means indeed a big investment in people. Then there is a second priority, which is to state good social standards. Let me just give an example we just adopted in Europe recently. We adopted a so-called European Pillar of Social Rights. By the way, adopted in Sweden, with the good inspiration of the Swedish model. And we believe that by stating good standards, good social standards for everybody, we can have the political leverage then to ask for the necessary means to implement this. I give you an example. Yes, many jobs in the digital area, they seem that they no longer respect basic standards. So let me tell you what we have done in Europe. We are saying that the new jobs for online platforms, millions of people now are working for online platforms, they should count on two basic guarantees. One is a proper labor contract with decent work, and the second is access to social protection. Whatever the job, whatever the sector, whatever the company, should count on these two guarantees. So it's so simple and so clear and so powerful. And then we say, but in order to enforce these updated social rights, we need to have powerful instruments. And we progressives, we know that we need to update some regulations to the new situation. We know that we need to provide access to public services, universal public services, starting with education, with healthcare. And then we come to the issue, which is how to finance this. How can we finance this? Because this is costly. And we believe that that's why tax policy is also an important instrument. We are in favor of progressive taxation because in fact we cannot accept that we have a minority of extreme rich people who don't pay their fair share. But we believe that we need to address new sources of taxation. And right now we are discussing about three main sources: financial taxation, carbon taxation, taxation on pollution, but also digital taxation. So these are new causes we need to discuss about as progressives, because these can bring us some resources. Of course, I fully agree with Lee Wan-min that when conducting political action, your recipe of the 4P is very good, very simple and very powerful. We as Social Democrats, we take care of the public sector, the private sector, we connect with professionals, and we are strongly focused on people's needs. Yes, this is our approach, for sure. And this means that we should implement this approach at all levels of governance. You start by giving an example on the state. So let's start with the local. The national, if this is federal, this is more complex, for sure. And then we have what we can do in macro regions. Regional integration has a role to play. And we have some interesting experience of regional integration. And we know, I can tell you from the experience, that if there is a future for regional integration, should also be based on strong regional policy. One of the reasons the European Union is surviving, in spite of many problems, is because we do have a very strong regional policy supporting the lagging behind regions. This is very important. And finally, the global level. And here we have serious problems. And we saw this recently in the last G7 summit in Biarritz. We can also see this in G20 summits, because all of a sudden, over the last years, the faces of the politicians sitting around the table are changing. Some of them belong to the other club, the club of a conservative, nationalistic, international, which is there. We cannot be naive. This international club is trying to organize itself. When Trump comes supporting particular leaders, this is a step in order to organize this international club. But let me tell you one thing. Yes, they have some strengths, and we cannot be naive. But I'm pretty sure that we have enough critical mass, imagination, political creativity, and capacity to implement, which will be strong enough to challenge them and to get a real reverse of the situation. And here, let me conclude the example of Malaysia, based on the long-term preparation, agenda, very sound political direction, as we saw now by the leaders' intervention, is really a very good example. So many thanks again to our Malaysian friends. Thank you.
So, dear comrades, as you see, our host has to leave. It's understandable. It's a busy finance minister. I really have now I have now the pleasure to announce the first panel discussion for today afternoon. The moderator is Rajiv, and I do not dare to pronounce your surname, so it's Rajiv. It's Rajiv. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Rajiv, you will moderate the panel on progress and social cohesion, the main title of our conference today. And actually, you have some homework to do right now. You have to find a solution for the 4 Ps, for the public sector, the private sector, the professionals, and the people, and how does it apply to the different aspects, and how to implement it. And then also having in mind what Maria João Rodrigues has said to us, I think we have to think about if we are really heading, and if this is our goal, progress and social cohesion, we have to finance it. We have to speak about taxations, new ways of taxations, and plus she also put it in the framework of the so-called social sustainable development goals, the SDGs. There's a nice translation of the SDGs, this acronym, in a different manner. It's not speaking about sustainable development goals, no, speaking about the social democratic goals, which we have to implement. So, Rajiv, the floor is yours, and I'm really keen to do your homework. Thank you.
Thank you. May I invite all the panelists to come on stage? Is Christopher Ng here? One more. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are once again running behind time. Konstantin, how long do we have for this session? A little bit less than 1 hour. All right. So we have Antonio Bonfatti from Argentina. We have Yo Bien from DAP Malaysia. She's also the Minister of Environment, Energy, Science and Technology and Climate Change. We have Christopher Ng, Secretary General for UNI Global Union. And we have Elka Ferner, sorry if I get the pronunciation wrong, from the SPD, Germany. So welcome everyone, and let's start off with a round of your opening address. Maybe we can keep it between 3 to 7 minutes, and then we go into a discussion with the audience as well as the panel. Since the mic is with Antonio, would you like to go first? And there'll be translation from Alejo.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos. La verdad es un gran placer de poder participar nuevamente.
It's a pleasure to participate here again
En esta actividad convocada por la Alianza Progresista.
in this activity summoned by the Progressive Alliance.
Yo comparto totalmente las palabras de María
I share completely the words of Maria,
y obviamente la declaración que hemos hecho, la resolución
and obviously
acerca
the
de
declarations and resolutions
cohesión y progreso social.
about social cohesion and progress.
Pero indudablemente estamos hablando de un mundo extremadamente diverso y complejo.
We are undoubtedly talking about a very diverse and complex world.
Diferencia entre continentes,
There's differences between continents,
en los mismos continentes diferencias entre países,
and within the continents themselves, difference between the different countries,
en países diferencia entre regiones y en regiones diferencia entre ciudades.
regions and cities within each of them.
Al mismo tiempo que estamos preocupados en el mundo por el trabajo del futuro y el futuro del trabajo,
As we are worried about work in the present and the future of work,
que compartimos, hemos estado en muchos seminarios y congresos debatiendo al respecto,
we have debated in many seminaries about it,
y compartiendo también que no hay desarrollo o progreso sin cohesión social y cohesión social sin progreso,
and given that there is no developments of social cohesion without progression and vice versa,
debemos compartir también que esto es incompatible si no existe la democracia en países del mundo.
we must agree that this is not possible without social democracy in the world.
Nosotros tenemos una triste realidad en América Latina en particular,
In Latin America, we have this sad reality
de lo que hemos vivido con los golpes de estados militares y los retrocesos que hemos padecido en nuestros países.
which what we have lived through with coup d'etats and the like in our countries as well. Yeah,
Y es imposible hablar de cohesión social y de progreso si no existe la libertad,
and it's impossible to talk about social cohesion and progressiveness without freedom.
y cuando hablo de libertad hablo de la capacidad de poder pensar, de poder decidir,
And when I speak about freedom, I'm thinking about the freedom of mind, freedom of choice.
y esto tiene que ver con superar la pobreza simbólica que existe en muchos habitantes de nuestros países en América Latina, la pobreza simbólica.
And it has to do with overcoming symbolic poverty in Latin America.
Y esto es debido a nuestra realidad que tiene que ver con la falta de derechos básicos.
This is due to our reality that has to do with the lack of basic rights.
Cuando hablamos de derechos básicos, nos estamos refiriendo al derecho a la salud,
When we talk about basic rights, we talk about the right to health,
el derecho al agua potable,
right to clean water,
a la educación,
right to
a la
education,
vivienda,
to housing,
a los servicios de salud,
to health services,
al trabajo.
and to work.
Entonces, esta es la realidad dual que vivimos en el mundo.
So this is
Países-
the dual reality that we live in the world.
en nuestros propios países de América Latina se está dando el debate
In our own Latin American countries, we're having the debate
acerca del futuro del trabajo y el trabajo del futuro,
about the future of the work and the work of the future.
pero esto es reducido a un pequeño grupo de personas que inexorablemente va a llegar,
But this is reduced to just a small number of people that will inexorably come to.
pero que tenemos que resolver fundamentalmente lo
people.
que hace a los derechos.
But we have to resolve the basic rights first.
Ahora, aquí la paradoja,
Here's the paradox.
porque se han dado muchos gobiernos en América Latina por parte de partidos progresistas, socialdemócratas, socialistas, en distintas instancias, nacionales o subnacionales.
We've had, sorry, can you go again?
La paradoja es que se ha dado
Yeah, the paradox that
muchos
is now-
gobiernos
Yeah, many governments,
nacionales o
yeah, national or
subnacionales,
subnationals,
progresistas,
progressive, social
socialdemócratas,
democratic,
socialistas,
yeah, socialists,
que han hecho avanzar y mucho
that have advanced and a lot
los progresos
the progresses
en base a los derechos de la población.
in base to the rights of the population.
Y sin embargo ha habido un retroceso
However, there's been a retrocess, a backpedaling
en cuanto a haber perdido elecciones
when it comes to having lost the elections
en países o en regiones.
in countries or regions.
Y esto es lo que nos cuesta poder dilucidar, interpretar, tener la
This is
bola de
why-
cristal para poder resolverlo.
Right. This is why it's so hard to to know what's going to happen, to have the crystal ball to see the future.
Tal vez hayamos perdido una batalla cultural,
We perhaps lost a cultural battle,
o tal vez el individualismo
or perhaps the individualism
a través de las nuevas tecnologías de comunicación nos han ganado.
through the new communication technologies have beaten us.
Yo no tengo la menor duda que cuando gobernamos tenemos que seguir trabajando para resolver los derechos básicos de la población.
I have no doubts that we have to continue to solve the basic rights of the population.
Pero me hago pregunta todos los días,
But I wonder every day,
¿por qué la socialdemocracia, el progresismo en el mundo
why does social democracy and progressiveness in the world
ha retrocedido?
is going backwards?
Miro a Europa que tal
I
vez
see
sea el
Europe.
continente al cual uno tiene más cercanía.
I see Europe, which is probably the continent that we have the most closeness with.
María decía que tenemos únicamente 5 presidentes o primer ministros socialdemócratas o socialistas o progresistas.
Maria said that we've only had 5 presidents that were social democrats or socialists.
Y me pregunto entonces cuál ha sido la causa del retroceso en donde hemos hasta tenido que vender la histórica casa del socialismo francés.
And I'm left wondering why we are going backwards, and we even had to sell what is that?
La casa
The,
histórica del
the,
socialismo
oh,
francés.
the historical house of French socialism.
¿O qué pasa con el laborismo inglés?
Or what's happening with the aborismo?
Laborismo.
The Labour Party in England.
Y podría seguir nombrando otros
And I could keep
países.
going and going with about other countries.
Creo en la necesidad de un Estado presente, fuerte,
I believe in the necessity of a strong present state,
en la necesidad de empoderar a la sociedad civil,
in the necessity of empowering the civil society,
en luchar a brazo partido por la igualdad de género y de oportunidades para la mujer,
in fighting strongly for gender equality.
pero debemos resolver cómo recuperar nuestros valores, cómo esos valores sean transmitidos a la población.
And we have to figure out how to give back those values to the people.
Tal vez en América Latina se esté dando una posibilidad de reflujo.
Maybe in Latin America this is resurging.
Hemos recuperado para el progresismo México.
We have recovered progressism in Mexico.
Tenemos posibilidades ahora en Uruguay nuevamente de renovar la presidencia en octubre.
We have a chance to renew the presidency in Uruguay in October.
Ha sido derrotada la extrema derecha neoliberal en Argentina.
The neoliberal far right has been beaten in Argentina.
Bueno, me hacen tiempo que corte, pero digo, dejo planteado
My
esto
time is almost up.
para la discusión porque me parece que es un tema que tenemos todavía que resolver.
Okay, but I think this is important, so I should continue later.
Thank,
¿Qué dijo?
We can't hear you. Is there a mic over there?
8, no 5.
Okay, not 5, 8. He's correcting. Standing corrected. Is that okay?
Okay, 8, not 5. All right. Okay. We stand corrected. Thank you very much. Could we have Yobiin as a representative of someone in government, one of our cabinet ministers, the youngest female cabinet minister, to...
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So glad to see all of you here. For those of you who are from outside of the country, welcome to Malaysia. This is a beautiful land, and we have just witnessed a change of government. Like many of you know, for the first time in the history of the country, we have changed the government. And of course, it's the first time in my life I become a cabinet minister. So let me, just now I listened with great interest the opening speech on progress, and a lot of people define progress differently. As a developing country, we define progress very differently. I'm a Minister of Energy, Science, Technology, Environment and Climate Change. I take care of many things. So part of this is about environment and climate change. So a lot of people, just now Maria in her opening speech talks about sustainable development. But many of us in the country have becoming the debate on sustainable development more on the sustainability. But there is no sustainable development when there is no development. Whenever we talk about sustainable development, it is actually talking about sustainability and development. That is why in Malaysia, as a developing country, we must, when we talk about and work towards sustainability, we must also work towards development. And let me give you an example, but I only have 3 minutes. So I will share with you later on.
3 to 7 minutes.
I'll share with you later on what are the things that we do in renewable energy. For example, I give you an example. I am an energy minister. We just set a new target for Malaysia in our electricity generation mix by increasing our renewable energy in electricity generation mix from 2% to 20%, excluding large hydro, by 2025. This is about, in 6 years' time, we want to hit an additional 3.9 gigawatt of renewable energy in our system. A lot of people will debate then is your electricity tariff going to be sacrificed because you want to add up more electricity? Let me just, beginning of this year, we actually do an open tender for large-scale solar. The results, the winners are not yet done, but because we have closed the tender, the first few lowest price are about 17.7 cents per ringgit Malaysia per kilowatt hour, 23.4 cents per kilowatt hour. This is not parity to gas power plant. This is even lower than the generation cost of gas power plant. This is what you can see, that when you are going green, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're paying for it. The question is, how do you know how do you not go ahead of the curve too much? When the cost efficiency has not dropped too much that you get into it, that is when you need to pay for a high cost of it. That is why Malaysia is focusing on renewable energy that is actually can be affordable. And the second thing I want to share with you, we are also looking into renewable energy as a job creation industry. Let me give you an example. Solar power, 1 gigawatt hour can create about 6.67 jobs. But 1 gigawatt hours of coal power can only create 0.06. So that is why when we go green, it is not only about affordability and sustainability, it is also a job creation. So there is actually a way of having development as well as being sustainable. So, and the second thing I would like to talk about is this. A lot of people like to talk about projects. But whenever we talk about projects, meeting a goal, we have always forgotten that in order for us to meet the goals, having the projects and everything, there is a need for money. I give you an example. For the entire world to actually meet our Paris Agreement target, if the entire world, everyone that signed the signatories of Paris Agreement, want to reach our Paris Agreement target, in energy sector alone, we need to have 13.5 trillion US dollar of investment. Do you know what is this year's targeted green bond? Not climate only. Green bond. This year, green bond, global issuance of green bond is only 200 billion US dollar. So you can do your calculation. It will take 60 years for us to actually hit the 13.5 trillion ringgit. Dollars, sorry, I mean Malaysia, but that is dollars. So there is a lot of time when the policymakers are making targets, we must also think of how do we finance that sort of targets. When the global is trying to meet a Paris Agreement target, we have a lot of target, but there is no target for the amount of money for the investment that is needed. There is a lot of rooms for the world to do the investment. Of course, in Malaysia, when we plan our renewable energy target, 25%, we are also planning for the targeted investment that is needed, which is 33 billion ringgit Malaysia. Only when you have an ecosystem with people, technology, and finance and regulatory framework that something can go beyond a term. So every time, just now Minister Slim say, we must stay in power. We must stay in power, but even if there is a change of ministers, sometimes the policies must live beyond the ministership. How do you want the policy to live beyond ministership? Is to have these four things. To have a legal institutional framework, to have an investment, private financing that is enough, to have people and to have technology that is for it. So I will leave it to the rest.
All right, thank you. Very pragmatic. But I think we need examples like this to demonstrate that the goals that we have as social democrats can be realized without burdening the people, but instead bringing more jobs and more opportunities and better well-being to the people. Can we have now Elke Ferner to share some perspective from Germany?
Yes, thank you so much to have the opportunity to share one special perspective, the perspective of gender equality, which is for me key for social progress and cohesion. We had all the years progresses, mostly little, but progress. Since some years progresses became less. Sometimes we were standing still and sometimes we faced backlashes. I think that's, we see that in all our countries. These backlashes were especially forced by right conservatives or populists and fundamental forces. Sometimes in behalf of traditions, sometimes on behalf of culture or religions. But women's rights are fundamental human rights and they cannot be restricted by any religion, culture, tradition or ideology. In the year 2019, 2.5 billion girls and women are affected by discriminatory laws and a lack of legal protection. Such laws reinforce and perpetuate gender inequality in terms of nationality and citizenship, health, education, employment, matrimonial rights and parental rights, and in terms of inheritance and property rights. At the World Women's Conference 25 years ago in Beijing, the states pledged to revoke any remaining laws that discriminate on the basis of sex and gender. Now it is 2019, and it is hardly time to fulfill these pledges. The states must deliver now. And it is necessary that laws are not only adopted, they need to be implemented and monitored as well. Worldwide, we have the best qualified women's generation we ever had, but their share in the labor market or in decision-making positions in industry, science, administration, or politics is far behind 50%. All gender gaps are far away to be closed. The gender pay gap, the gender pension gap, the gender care gap, unpaid work, we heard it in the morning, is still women's work. The gender gap in political participation and the gender gap in decision-making positions. For social democrats and socialists and progressives, gender equality is one of our core values. It is a question of justice and a question of dignity that women and men have equal rights, equal opportunities, and an equal share in all areas of society and life. These are reasons enough to fight for achieving gender equality, but all these gaps are hindering the economic and social development in our countries as well. We know without gender equality, a sustainable progress is not possible. Furthermore, several researchers show the identical participation of women in economies would add as much as 28 trillion US dollar to global economy. That means an additional 26 growth of GDP. This is a strong argument as well, and we should use it as well. For profit-oriented companies, justice does not count, but the benefit counts. They need to recognize that gender equality leads to a better economic progress. When we talk about gender equality, we need to speak about gender-based violence as well. A gender-equal society is a society where women and girls can live free from gender-based violence. According to the United Nations, 1 in 3 women has been or will become a survivor of physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. In 2017, 87,000 women were victims of femicide. 58% of them were killed by intimate partners or family members. 137 women around the world are killed by a member of their own family every day. And girls and women account 71% of victims in trafficking. Nearly 3 out of every 4 trafficked girls and women are trafficked for the purpose of sexual exploitation. And roughly 650 million girls and women worldwide were married before the age of 18. At least 200 million girls and women alive today have suffered female genital mutilation in the 30 countries with substantial data on prevalence. We must stop gender-based violence. And therefore, we must make girls and women strong and economically independent by eliminating all kinds of discriminations. We need to establish help systems that protect and support the victims of gender-based violence, and we need a society and authorities that do not longer accept any gender-based violence. Not the victims, but the perpetrators must be persecuted. Dear comrades, to achieve full gender equality according to the SDG Goal 5, there are only 10 years left. We don't have a lack of knowledge, but we have a lack of action. And we as social democrats, socialists and progressives can make gender equality happen if we start to action now. Thanks.
Thank you. A very, very concise and sobering wake-up call. But maybe could I ask you a question with a probably, hopefully a short answer? What's holding us back?
I don't know what is holding us back, because we are fighting for gender equality since our parties exist. But I think we always think something is more important. And this is the mistake, the fault we make. Gender equality is, for my opinion, the main contradiction, not a side contradiction. And if we don't learn this, and we do not gender mainstream all our policies, we will not be successful.
All right, thank you. Could we have Christopher Ng to give your opening remarks?
You know, I want to start off by saying I'm very, very pessimistic. I mean, the world is so gloomy, actually.
Could you hold the mic nearer a bit?
I mean, it's such a gloomy world. For a start, you know, I mean, we have the Piketty, then Oxfam, every year repeatedly pointed out to us the disastrous situation of the inequality and the poverty that is everywhere. And at the same time, Oxfam statistics shows that lesser and lesser people are owning more and more of the world wealth. It is ridiculous. I mean, we have nearly 7 billion people in the world, and 8% are commanding the majority of the world wealth. I mean, common sense prevailing. Can the world survive on this basis? And this is where I still remember Professor Schwab, the chairman of the World Economic Forum, in his conclusion to his first book on the fourth industrial revolution, he concluded by saying that there can be no legislation or regulation to ensure that people don't abuse this technology that are available now. He concluded by saying that what is lacking is the moral will, the moral values, and this is where Antonio brought it up just now. You ask why the social democratic values are not progressing, because we have lost the will. We all only understand that we all have to compete for more and more wealth. Let me explain to you why. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I was in Manila for the World Economic Forum on East Asia, and I was in a panel, you know, and the panel was discussing nearly on the same theme. And then I have a speaker, a panel member, stood up and very bravely complained. Oh, he said, you know, Bill Gates have so much money, he don't know what to do. Oh my God, I lost my temper there. I stood up and said, for God's sake, don't make so much money. My point to you is this, it's so ironical. They make so much money, they create a philanthropic foundation, and then they tell the whole world, we are giving away the money. But nobody knows they don't pay tax. If they had paid tax today, we wouldn't have so much a problem. I'm giving you this illustration to point out that this is sick, you know. We are in a sick world when people who get away with it are being praised. And then we overlook the fact that they have committed the biggest sin in the world. I mean, for me, this is frightening. More so, you have to bear in mind, I've been with the trade union movement for 42 years. I started very young, full of ideal. I think the world would be a better place. And for over the 42 years, I see only deterioration. For me, I fear. What we are talking is just talk. But I've seen and I can tell that we are living in a time bomb. If we don't do anything to correct it, it will explode. And therefore, if you look at Hong Kong, for example, it's very hard to understand. Even I tried very hard to understand. How the hell can you get so many young Hong Kong people persistently 12, 14 weeks going, on demonstrations? Some say, they are political motivation. Yes, but still you cannot get these people persistently going out every day, every weekend. Why? Because that is a manifestation of what I've been saying. It is a time bomb. People are pushed to a corner. At one point of time, if we are unfortunate, all these outbursts come together, then we have an eruption. This is why I think we need to bring back the value to people. So when you ask how can we keep the value progressing, I think we have to bring it back, convince our young people that the world is more than just making money. They have to believe that we have to be together, reinstate the value so that the world have a chance. If everybody think, I may be the one that will be able to be the next billionaire, we are in big trouble. So for me, I think this is my main concern and worry. We have to go back to the ground, convince our people, our children, our friend or relative, each of us must act in a humane way. Failing which, I think we have no right to live and no right to exist. That's what I want to say, because for me, this is the most frightening scenario.
Yeah, it may be the American dream, but people around the world are chasing that millionaire and billionaire status. I think we are looking at two very big problems. Why are we as social democrats unable to persuade our constituents that this is the better solution for them? Why are social democrats not winning in every country that we are represented in? And the second challenge is when we talk about the rising wealth among individuals or certain corporations, the competition among countries to attract these investments, these investors and these rich people in. If we continue to persist to allow this competition to go on, tax breaks will continue to be dished out, and that problem, that gap may never be resolved. So any of the panelists would like to weigh in on this? How can we as social democrats address this problem? Christopher? Okay, Antonio.
Solo pensar que 10, creo que me alcanzan los dedos de la mano.
I have enough fingers in my hand to count
de gente que
the
tiene
people that have
más de la mitad
more than
del
half
dinero del mundo,
of the money
solamente
in the world. I just
10
need only
personas.
one hand, yeah.
Y creo que allí está el problema de la
And there
enorme
lies the
desigualdad
problem.
que existe en el mundo.
The huge inequality that exists
Y mi
in the
temor es
world.
que este cambio de época con las tecnologías, lo digital, las comunicaciones,
And my fear is that in these times that we're having so many changes
incremente
technologically,
aún más la desigualdad.
the inequality will grow even bigger.
Y pareciera que tenemos que, y abro por América Latina, que sufrir para después darnos cuenta de que todo lo que hemos perdido, ¿no?
And to echo from what we had to experience in Latin America, it seems like we have to suffer before learning.
Todo lo que hemos perdido.
Before learning everything that we lost.
Hoy el hecho de que haya países que estén ya volviendo nuevamente a gobiernos progresistas pareciera que está indicando al menos un resurgir de la posibilidad de gobiernos progresistas.
The fact that some progressive governments are popping up again
Pero otra
is
vez,
encouraging.
otra vez pasarán más de una década a recuperar todo lo que hemos perdido con gobiernos neoliberales.
But it will be another decade before we get back everything that we lost with the neoliberal governments.
La destrucción de lo público, las privatizaciones de servicios esenciales.
The destruction of public services.
Servicios esenciales,
Yeah,
servicios básicos.
essential basic services, and the
La
privatization
destrucción de las universidades.
the destruction of
Y
universities,
fundamentalmente
and fundamentally,
la conciencia colectiva, que es
yeah,
tal vez donde hay más que insistir para
the
recuperar esos
destruction of the
valores.
collective mind, which is what we have to fight for to get back.
Okay, Elke, you wanted to say something?
I think this is what we face in Germany and in other European countries, is that we have to make clear that we cannot be greener than the Green Party. And but we also have to deliver in terms of environmental policies. And our approach is that we will have a fair balance between the needs of stopping the pollution of our environment and the needs of the people, the workers, the employees who need other perspectives if they are working in a sector which is not good for the environment. So we need to show them that we not only stop the pollution, but that we also care for them, and that we offer transformation for their jobs, that they can work in other sectors and can earn the money they need to live with her families and to have a good life, a better life than their parents had. So this is, I think, the approach we need. And sometimes when we are in power, we are not so, how can I say, they do not believe us, that we are staying for our values. And sometimes we act against the values. You know, if we are in a coalition, it's not easy to make only policies according to social democratic values.
Don't worry, we in the DAP understand what you in SPD are facing. We too are constantly facing our core base and having to answer for decisions that are really not what we would like to see. The practicalities of being in a coalition government. Could we get, would you, Maria, like to respond to what any of the speakers have shared? And would anyone in the audience like to ask a question or comment? Now we have a couple of mics. Who are the guys holding the mics? Yeah. Okay, could I take a show of hands? All right. We've got two gentlemen in front, but let's have Maria kick it off.
Well, in fact, I would prefer to be one of the last and not one of the first, but okay. Look, I think this panel again was very important for us to see the challenges ahead of us. Because many of the speakers underline two very important things. One is the capacity to focus on people's needs with very concrete solutions which can really work. For instance, the example you gave about making the energy transition in Malaysia and the need to have sustainability but also real development, this is a very important argument. And I think if progressives want to be credible, they need to be able to combine two things. One is to have the long-term vision, the solutions which are needed for real progress, but on the second part of the approach is the capacity to deliver very concrete improvements on people's life. These I can tell you also from my own country. Because sometimes people are asking me, but how do you manage to have almost absolute majority in the Portuguese case? It's because this is a long tradition. We have developed with Guterres and many other leaders. On one hand, we keep the vision on the long-term challenges and the real progressive answer, but on the other hand, we provide very practical solutions. But I would say, many of you also underline this. Today, there's also a battle on values, on culture. Yes, absolutely. And we see this when working with young people. Because young people, they can be attracted by the technological development, by this illusion that we can make big personal wealth by playing in the financial markets. But we know this is not true. This is for a minority of people. So if we really want to regain influence, This is hegemony in the good sense of the word. Most of it, this is a cultural battle. So I completely agree with you. So this is my first comment.
All right, thank you very much for that comment. Maybe we can get the gentleman in front.
My question to Christopher. You talked about the gap between rich and majority poor. So how you fill that gap? Because yesterday we used to have a nationalizing the wealth. Those were the ways, the state intervention. Those were the ways. But in this era of democracy, you have to have a private property rights fundamentalized. So in that case, how you fill that gap? Or distributing the wealth, or taxing them, or you have a capital tax on them? This is the question. Thank you.
All right, maybe get one more comment before we go back to the panel.
A short question and a comment. To the minister, you said your target is to increase the mix of renewables from 3% to 20% by 2025. Yeah? We had a similar target in India, but we have not been able to succeed. Because, and do you experience you said job creation through renewable energy, but the lobby of the fossil fuel and the petroleum lobby, very powerful, and installation of renewable is also costlier than the fossil fuel. So how are you resolving it? That's the dilemma. The other point, my trade union friend, you gave a good picture of the old social democratic thinking. The dilemma that we are suffering. Is the finance minister from yesterday, and he repeated it today, of Malaysia. There is a refreshing change of language. When social democrats come to power, the vocabulary changes, which is good because they become realist. Otherwise, like he said, otherwise socialists all over are known famous for being in opposition and challenging ideas, but running the government. And he has been alerting us from yesterday that we have to be friendly with the business, we have to grow the pie, we have to create wealth to be able to distribute. I agree with him on that. Because as socialist, brother, if we are always talking of poverty, and to the extent of glamorizing poverty that we do in India, then nobody wants to be poor actually. Poverty is a relative condition. If you ask anybody, do you want to remain poor? He said, no, we want to prosper. You see, Tony Blair got it very well in Britain. You see, and that changing aspirations of the people, we have to address that. You see, and then one socialist in India, he put a ban on spending. He said, you can make as much money you want, but you cannot spend it. You see, so that means you have to distribute. So we have to have a policy to distribute wealth, but we are against wealth. Then, like the finance minister said, we should always aim for permanent opposition. Thank you.
Okay, one more comment and then we'll go to the panel. We'll come back for a second round of comments.
Sorry, but just one comment, because here is the discussion about the whole world and in different countries, German, Europe, Malaysia and other. But what's my feelings when I see all the world, there is one big comment about there is no security and safe in all the world. And especially if we will speak about like Arab countries that different than Europe, different than the other countries, always threatened by wars. Always they have increasing the poverty. So at the end, there is no social justice for the people to ask for equal life if they don't have the basic human rights to live. So how we could know the needs of the people as a grassroots working with the people and within the high level as a decision makers who put all their efforts on military more than the needs of the people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christopher, would you like to start off?
I think for a start, I must clarify, I'm not against profiteering. I believe profiteering is important as part of the initiative to encourage people. But I don't believe in that kind of absolute profiteering that we are experiencing. This brings me back in. I don't know whether you are aware or not. The former Thai king, many years ago, some 20 years ago, he suggested the concept of sufficient economy. Frankly, I'm very impressed because it's also based a little bit on the Buddhism thinking, and that concept is actually essentially what we need. People should have sufficient but not extravagant. Now, on your question as to how to stop this divide and this profiteering, to do that, you have to understand the economy, the global economy that we are talking about. I mean, I've been now in 40 years in this. I've seen how the economy has been transformed, starting with the economic integration, the creation of international organization like the World Trade Organization and what have you got. If you study very carefully, every regulation that comes out of the WTO is not designed to protect the consumer or the country. It's designed to facilitate another person, another organization to make another part of the profit. So there's no ending to it. Let me give you a very crude example. Before we have technology, when you transfer money from one to another, we have the SWIFT. Today the SWIFT is irrelevant, but you are still paying huge fees for something you don't need because the American control it, they decided not to give it away. So this is an example. If you look at the technology, look at Bill Gates and all those software, for God's sake, every piece of our equipment, we are now paying for the software. I still remember in the earlier days, I bought a piece of software, I use until if I want to upgrade, if I don't want, I don't upgrade. Today they insist you buy on an annual basis. These are things that we have to stop. Why? Because the business are in total control. So everybody fall in line. To this, I want to say to you now. Now, yesterday somebody talked about the Asian century. The Asian century is actually frightening, particularly to those profiteering companies or organizations. Because in the Asian century, we are going to see a shift. Because if you look at the global economy, the dictate in the past has always been this big multinational. And they dictate the rules, so they cornered the market. Today, the world is revolving now. I personally see the inevitable, reversal of all these rules in a way that it become more sustainable, more meaningful. Let me conclude by saying, again, I want to refer to the DAP. Frankly, all of us should be very encouraged. What the DAP has done is an encouragement for all of us. And I'm telling you, it's a reflection of what is to come. Because in Europe now, in particular, forget about the United States, Europe has always been the protector of human rights and democratic rights. But the last 5, 10 years, I think this is all being traded off. There are changes in government. So you see the energetic response of European government to propagate and protect human rights is now increasingly being compromised. This is where I think Asia, for example, the social democrats in Asia must assume this responsibility. If not, the slide will continually go down. So that's why when I look at the DAP, I think the DAP with their positive experience could provide the inspiration for the other Democratic Action Party to also equally, work towards strengthening themselves, helping the countries in different countries, so that they have the capacity and the capability to collectively stop the rot and the slide. Because if we don't, can you imagine a world without an organization like this? We are in big trouble. We are already in big trouble. We cannot afford not to have another, organization to stop the slide.
Bean, you want to add?
Just as a response to, so how do we meet the target? Actually, we have a long-term plan. We have a plan until 2037. So every year, how much of a energy project that we tender, how much of a megawatt? Actually, it's just calculation, and we tender according to the plan, and we will meet the target very easily. That for Malaysia is much easier because we are centralized planning. Our power is centralized planning. We have an energy ministry that takes control of the entire peninsular Malaysia, west of Malaysia, and the east of Malaysia are different, but we are quite coordinated in terms of that. So it is not as challenging as India. So we definitely can meet the target. The question is to the question is that the challenge, the issue is that how do we maximize when we meet the target that we also create enough jobs and economic prosperity to the people. Just now the comrades say one thing is that we turn from social democrat to a realist when we govern. That is some sort of truth. And it's not only about social democrat. I think if even the right wing that if they get into power, they will govern like a realist. So everyone that governs are realist. I think if you want to govern well, we are talking about coalition government. We are talking about a polarized global world. We are polarized nation, like what Antonio said. So you have to govern in the middle. You cannot govern towards, but that doesn't mean that we actually lose our ideology and lose our idealism. Is how do you govern in the middle, hold your idealism, and make sure that it is practically possible in governing. I would also want to say a little bit on the Christopher remark on Bill Gates. Actually, just to make a disclaimer, I'm a Gates Foundation scholar, so I actually benefit from the rich person's money.
Receive some of his wealth.
Yeah, I'm actually I get sponsored full sponsorship scholarship when I studied in Cambridge, and there are many more people that actually studied in Cambridge that actually are sponsored by Gates Foundation. And there's one thing that that actually inspired me is that what he said during the summer. I think rich people are not the enemy. The question that to this unequal world is policymakers. It's not people who are innovative and trying to make their lives better. It is people who are making the laws, who are the one that become the government and making sure that there's an institutional framework. I remember one thing that he said during the summer before I was in Cambridge. He said this. He said that make sure the scholarship I give to you worth the money. Make sure you spend the pounds that I give to you versus the money I give to save the life for malaria in somewhere in Africa. So I think it is not so much on whether or not we are trying to stop the people of rising to the top or generating more wealth. The question that we need to ask ourselves is, as the world prosper, how do we make sure it is shared? How do we make sure that the money generated are invested into a better future? For example, into education, into eradication of poverty, into a breakthrough in health, so that normal diseases like malaria will no longer kill people. Investment in sanitary that girls actually in Africa spend a lot of time just to take buckets of water, and then they can't go to school because of water. So this kind of investment, we need it. So as a government, actually I am a realist as well. So when I want to reach my renewable energy goal, I ask myself how much of money I need. And as a socialist, we tend to say, well, let's use public funding. The only way that, I mean, maybe not all of you, but some of us would say that, why not we tax more on the people and then invest in renewable energy? I think there are another way to do it. There is another way is to have an institutional framework where we use private financing to finance the good things that you do. So the whole idea of being a government is how do you provide a regulatory framework where you actually channel wealth, the wealth of these people towards the thing, a better good, a common good for people. That is why Malaysia, and we actually have a new, target that we call ourselves shared prosperity. But there must be prosperity before it can be shared. So
okay, I want to, can I just check, can we have, okay, one comment from the front? No, it's okay. All right. So, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would like to add something. I deeply believe in public services, which are available for all people, for all citizens. And the access to public services, especially to education, should not depend on the grace of some rich people. It should be the skills of the students that they are allowed to go to university and not the access to a foundation or something like this. So therefore, I think we need a good taxation of them, of those who have the money and who are not become poor if we if they pay higher taxes than the poorer people. And this money, the taxes the state gets, then the policy has to decide, the parliaments have to decide how to spend this money for public services. Okay, in the energy, it's a little bit difficult. You need also private investment, but also the energy sector is at least belongs to the public services, because you should the access to energy should also not be only in private hands, so that all people can benefit from it. Yeah.
But the thing about this is that whenever you talk about a tax, a lot of people like to think that the only way of building public goods is through taxing. Of course, tax is something that is important. We collect tax from Malaysia has a progressive tax structure. I just want to declare here. The overall idea is the tendency of policymakers, without going through innovation, without thinking out of the box, without being creative in our policy, our first solution to every of our problems is taxing. So I just want to say this, is that there are many more regulatory tools that we can do to make sure, but of course we also tax. In Malaysia we have a tax of about 20% to our income tax. We have corporate tax. We have progressive tax. So, but the idea is that whatever challenge is that whenever we talk about when we have our narrative, we must make sure the first thing we do is that the well-being of the people to be created the maximum possible way. It doesn't mean that you need to tax the maximum possible way, or you want to give public goods by just through taxing. So I give you an example in Singapore. Singapore has 80% home ownership. They have public transport, public goods. Their environment is good. But are they having highly taxed country? They are not. So you can actually achieve and find a balance. And I think that is very important, that as we want to produce and give equal opportunity and equal good education for people at the bottom, good healthcare for the people at the bottom, it doesn't necessarily mean higher tax. I am just saying that it doesn't always means higher tax. Yeah.
This is getting interesting and hot, but unfortunately we have run out of time, and we want to get back on track with regards to time for today's program. We need to appeal to the masses. We need to have solutions that appeal to everyone. We need to be able to learn to communicate them, so we are empowered and able to implement them. We also need to close that financial gap to be able to implement these ideas. It is something that we should not shy away from, taxation. At the same time, explore the other creative solutions besides taxations towards achieving it. I wish we had an hour to carry on with this debate, but all good things must come to an end. So over to you, Konstantin.
Okay, thank you so much for this panel. Thank you very much to the panelists. And thank you